Hello and welcome to DuPont Esko Virtual Summit. All participants are muted by default to avoid background noise. If you would like to ask a question, please use the question tab on the right side of your screen. We will try to address all questions at the end of the session. The webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email with the link to the recording after the webinar. If you are having audio or video issues, please refresh your browser and increase your computer's volume. If you need a dial-in number, click the help button, then phone dial-in to find the number and code. Today is about labels, and the first session is a town hall hosted by Jim Schultz, who works for Mark Andy as digital integration specialist based out of Chicago. Jim has over 3 decades of experience in the Flexo industry with a focus on implementing digital prepress and playmaking systems. Jim graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Stout with a focus in packaging. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Julian. I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual Flexo Summit. Today, be having 3 panelists and questions asked to them. And I'd like to take the opportunity and thank everyone for participating. And I'd like to begin with the introductions of the panelists. So our first panelist is Thomas H. DeBora, President of Hub Labels Incorporated. Thomas has 3 decades of commitment to managing people and leveraging production practices along with application technologies, which have been instrumental in positioning Hub as a progressive and innovative prime label company. Thomas is currently serving on the board of the Maryland World Class Consortia. Other activities involve a 30-year commitment to the National Ski Patrol. He is also an active mountain biker. Thomas is a graduate from Mount St. Mary's College in 1991 with a BS degree in economics, business, and finance. Thomas lives on a horse farm in Maryland with his wife and young daughter just south of the Mason-Dixon line. Our second panelist is Kim Madigan, Director of Corporate Color, Smythe Companies. Kim is responsible for the prepress groups and color control processes across the organization. Kim has over 30 years of experience in the Flexo industry and is a current board member and the 2020 recipient of the President's Award at the FTA. Our third panelist is Ken Pavette, CEO and Chief Technical Officer, Flexographics Incorporated. Ken leads a team of talented industry professionals for Flexographics, a technically advanced and customer-focused color separator located in the Chicago area with customers nationwide. Ken is a degreed chemist with 32 years experience in the flexographic printing trade. So question number 1, I guess we can begin with Thomas. How is your company adapting to these new times and way of doing business?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Well, that's kind of a loaded question regarding the COVID. So I think we've been following all the protocols that the CDC and a lot of the industry trade groups have been sending our way. We're working split shifts in our work pods. We've got people, even in the graphics department, able to work from home. So fortunately, our local internet is robust enough that it can handle that. And the kids going back to school hasn't impacted that. Our philosophy recently has been planning for the inevitable when we get an exposure to COVID. So a lot of the work that we've been doing have been dry runs. We pick random people who we, I'll say virtually exposed to COVID, and then try to figure out where we have flaws in our system. What we've uncovered is some cases where we've got people working too close together, and we're expanding our workspace into other parts of the building. We've also purchased watches that are able to detect when people come in contact with each other. So if we do have a case, instead of being location or reacting to locations, now we can react to whom they've been in contact with. The other thing, we're automating a temperature sensor, so when employees come to work, we can ensure that they come to work healthy. But other than that, just keeping our staff healthy and positive has been the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Thomas. Kim, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So we have pretty much the same situation going where our Prepress group works heavily through workflows and automation. So because of that, we were able to adapt and move most of our employees off-site, and then left a few critical key employees on-site to manage like visual reviews of proofs, etc., or comparing of a print sample and or proofs to each other on site. And then we have a communication link system that allows us to communicate almost as if we're in the room, kind of using, like the Microsoft Teams type thing or Skype for Business type thing, so that there's an open group of pre-press people constantly talking to each other, just like when we were in the room, that we can say, oh, I got that. I'll go ahead and make that adjustment. And another person knows to go get it from the proofer because it's coming out. It's been a very flexible work process because we had kind of already been building automation and workflows that didn't need a lot of hands-on. It's just at critical points. So we were able to adapt very quickly and move people around, just like we were talking about a little bit earlier, and also moving people into office space that's been that's open now because of other people moving from other departments. We've moved them around the building, separating our employees by walls whenever possible, because we were a cube-based environment originally. So yeah, it hasn't changed drastically. We did have offsite people, but we've brought that number up to about 75% of our pre-press group working offsite. We've always required cross-training into roles. Obviously, there's some people that are definitely better at some things, but they do have the capabilities of filling in and helping out based on work instruction support, etc. And just because we are pretty flexible and moving around every day, it allows us to be meet the needs based on this COVID situation very easily.
Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
And Ken.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everyone. I honestly think that 40% of my company had the coronavirus back in February before everyone got closed down. And so when we got sick, 40% of us were out at the same time. We started putting things in place right then. So we got a software system that keeps track of visitors inside the company. As soon as the coronavirus hit, we got scanning thermometers. So any visitor that comes in has to scan their forehead, ask the CDC questions, log that into a system. They get a label printed. They have to wear the label when they're in the plant. They have to sign out using that label. And it's a pretty nice way of just making my people feel comfortable that the company's doing reasonable things to protect everyone's safety. And I think that's what all three of us are talking about right now. The other thing is, as a leader, I've had to deal with my own fears, the fears of, my company getting wiped out from this, and people not being able to come back to work. And so, I'm a pretty regular meditator, and I've been meditating more regularly. I've actually brought in a spiritual teacher, and she leads biweekly meditations for all my team, which kind of settles everyone down. We've had more meetings since the coronavirus became a real thing of concern than we did probably for 2 years prior to that cumulatively. And so also, one of the things that's been really important to me is being super transparent, which I am by nature, but super transparent with my employees so they feel comfortable. We're doing similar things to Thomas and Kim in that we've got plenty of space in our office. And so people are spaced in cubicles, but they're spaced plenty of room apart where everyone feels comfortable and safe. From a financial perspective, we have taken advantage of the PPP loan that the government offered us, which now could be turned into a subsidy, just so we've got a little bit more cash on hand. From a customer perspective, it's very interesting. Some customers want to see us as though nothing has changed, but just bring a mask. I've also shipped, kind of a care package with a computer and a USB microscope to do technical support remotely. We've done more Zoom technical calls, planning calls, one troubleshooting call than we ever have. And we've been using Zoom probably for a year and a half before this became an issue for all of us. I would say from a prospect and customer perspective, it's interesting. Some of our customers are very busy. Some of our customers are very quiet. Prospects is kind of like operating in a traffic jam. It's hurry up, we want to see you right away, or we want this project right away, and stop, stall, delay, and then something will happen, and then, okay, we need this to move forward very quickly. And so I think the traffic jam is kind of a good analogy in terms of business opportunities where things seem to flow and then they stop flowing and then they get back in the flow, or they just get quiet and have been quiet for months. So I would say it's a reminder to me to be even more compassionate with my employees and with customers and prospects, because everyone on the planet right now is dealing with some aspect that maybe this coronavirus has created something that's come up for them.
Thank you, Ken. So it sounds like everyone is working with being able to adapt with everything that's been going on. So thank you. So I'd like to move on now to question 2, and I'd like to start with Kim with this question. Do you have digital capabilities where you are able to blend both Flexo and digital, or has your business created different divisions?
So I work at a, medium-sized print company, and we do Flexo, sheet fed, offset, and mid-web, Flexo, narrow web, Flexo, and digital. And we have digital capabilities in sheet fed and Flexo. We tend to group our digital right in with our Flexo in our Flexo processes, and same with our sheet fed. But mainly because some of the customers' needs are sometimes we have products that maybe start out on a Flexo press and there's a bunch of screen bases printed, and then they might move to digital and have graphics put over the top for variable print and commodities, etc. But we also can then move jobs quickly from a short run needed today, sells off the shelves tomorrow, and then the next day we need labels on Flexo presses based on the quantities and turnaround times. So we have to be able to adapt very quickly. So having our digital right together with our printing areas seems to be a good fit for our customer base. And that's kind of what we've been seeing across even our sheet fed process, that just keeping them close together and sharing that work and has been a benefit for us. Also, one of the things that we've taken a lot of time over the last couple of years is, and we're not completely converted, but we've converted to everything aligning to Grackle and using the G7 methodology to help us align our digital capabilities with all of our print capabilities across our organization.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Sure.
Thomas, would you like to go next?
Well, we're certainly not as complicated as Kim. We do have a digital press capabilities, but we're predominantly a Flexo shop. So it's not as complex, but we do have requirements where our customers will have, say, 12 different SKUs in a family, and we're required to blend the 2 different processes to be able to support them. So our workflow is designed to be able to match both Flexo and digital it hasn't been easy, but lately as digital becomes a lot better, it's certainly become a lot easier.
Thank you, Thomas. And Ken, you can go next, and maybe you'd like to also talk maybe a little bit, Ken, because I know you're a trade shop, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how you may have customers that have the need to, send you work and have the need to be able to match digital with conventional Flexo.
So, when years ago, when offset people started putting in their own pre-press departments, some of the trade shops that were providing work for offset printers put in presses, actual offset presses, and then they would do first articles or color standards, and then from my memory they started actually doing some production work. In the early mid 2000s, we looked at possibly putting in a digital press and being a job shop for our customers because of our expertise in color management. And then 0809 hit, and everyone remembers what happened to the economy in 0809. And what I kind of surmised from that whole situation was, if we put in a digital press and had a payment, and then our customers got really quiet, well, what would we do? Well, it would put us in a situation where we could possibly compete with our customers. And that, in our line of work, especially with my company, integrity is like one of our most important values. So we got into the color management side. So what we do is we help customers color manage their Flexo to digital, or digital to Flexo, or digital and Flexo to a common standard like Kim's using Grackle. And that's something that we do a couple different ways, and we even automate it for some customers where it's a drop a file in a hot folder and on our FTP site, and the converted file pops back out ready to get put on a Flexo plate or a digital press. And I see that as an important product as we go forward. Many companies, maybe without the resources of Smythe or Hub Labels, have this issue where they've got almost two different silos. They've got the Flexo silo and the digital silo, and to get one to match the other takes an awful lot of work. And we've come up with ways of doing that with very good predictability to help our customers just improve the efficiency of the workflow when a job happens to go from one stream to the other.
This is Kim. I have another statement, sorry.
Sure.
Just from what we've been talking about here, but I do think that we have seen, I'm trying to think of a specific customer, but a specific opportunity. But we've seen this kind of work that between even digital presses, because of we have a couple different, actually a handful of different digital presses, different manufacturers, and what their needs for the, sometimes the color matches, but you can't build the files exactly the same because they don't have a black that's opaque enough, or it shows the traps more. So if you took a Flexo file, we can't really run it through. So there's additions to just color concerns that are coming up as we bring work from digital to any normal press technology, print methodology. So we have to go in and maybe remove traps or put traps in, or make a rich black for this digital press versus this digital press over here is black enough that it doesn't need that. And also, like I said, the trap situation or building whites is different between all these manufacturers. So that's the one thing that I can't really get a handle on, and that we still requires a desktop person really to kind of maybe take something apart and make something happening in the file, rather than, if it's a color conversion, absolutely we have workflows very similar to what Ken was saying. But when it comes to the actual mechanics of the build needed for some of these presses, that's the caveat on this discussion.
Sure, I can see where predictability is really important, and being able to make file alterations to overcome some of the limitations between the two processes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to move on to question number 3, and I'd like to begin with Thomas. What recent technological innovations have been most important in improving the quality of flexographic printing?
Wow, that's in light of COVID, which is we're always seeming to think about these days. I think you stumped me on that one. I'm gonna take a pass for now. We'll let Ken and Kim come to my rescue.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So how about Ken?
Okay. The one, there's a couple things. As a trade shop plate maker in today's business climate, our future is never secure. That's the way I look at it. And we've got to have innovations that create glue that glue our customers to their customers, and therefore making us more important. So in line with that, and pretty timely, we installed on a trial basis Esko's print control wizard and crystal screening, and because we did a print evaluation and a prospective customer, and we saw the value of it, and we were pursuing a business opportunity and felt like it was a requirement for gaining that business. We've had a trial license for a few months now, and we're bringing that technology out to certain customers to see if we can get them interested or prospects interested in helping us grow our business together. That, and about 4 years ago, we installed Bellissima Screening, which is a product of Hamel Road Software, and that has been a unique tool as a premium screening package. I don't want to say similar to Crystal, but kind of in the same line of advanced screening to elevate our customers' level of print performance, and especially when we have customers that are trying to match digital or match offset or match rotogravure with Flexo. That's another important technology. And then the third one that we have direct experience in is direct laser engraving. So we got into the sleeve business in 2017. It's been, I would call it a slow start. We learned pretty much from the ground up. We have one key team member who's got some experience on CO2 laser technology, which has helped us tremendously. This is a fiber laser, and it's capable of doing just about anything that a normal CDI laser can do in terms of reproduction. Those are 3 technologies that we use as product differentiators that have really proven to help our customers improve their print quality.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thomas, did you want to add anything to question number 3?
Yeah, so it gave me a chance to reflect on some of the stuff that we've been doing. We've been tremendously focused on some manufacturing innovations. So from a technology standpoint, when I think technology, I don't think that we've implemented any big changes other than the Esko 4835. We were able to, but like I said, most of the stuff that we've been working has been looking at root cause analysis and then going out and trying to innovate around that. But I mean, we're here talking about, we're here representing Esko in some cases, and I will say the 4835, we're starting. My guys would make mistakes on eliminating back exposures for some reason. I don't know what it was, but they would forget to back expose. But obviously now with the 4835 having the integrated back exposure with the front, that problem has been all but eliminated. Along with, we've knocked about 10 minutes off on our processing time. So from an operational standpoint, if somebody chews up a plate out on press, it's given us some time back, being able to burn some plates a lot quicker. But like I said, most of our stuff, we've really focused on G7, implementing some color controls so we can consistently deliver better quality to our customers. But I can't say this year is one of those years where we've come out and bought a new digital press, it's been mostly focused around operations. I mean, I wish I had something really cool and innovative that I could share with the listeners, but it's been more operationally based.
Certainly. Thank you, Thomas. Does anyone have anything more they'd like to add before I move on?
I actually have a couple things on this one.
Sure.
And so just I come from the pre-press side of the business, and I fingerprint every press throughout our organization, and have had to do a lot of take my time and do all these readings, average everything together, put together these Excel charts to do your averaging, put it into the system, go ahead, make your plate. Now you got to go back to press and make profile runs, and you got to try to hit your aim points. I think one of the things, and one of the biggest things I am very happy to use from the Esko toolbox is their curve and soft profile creation softwares have really taken us to another level, because I can run a P2P on my fingerprints. I scan it in, it automatically is taking and averaging everything together based on my what settings you put in, and then I can go ahead and say that this is what I'm going to set up for my curves, and I'm aiming at Grackle, and I go ahead and save that. And now I have a profile that's aimed on that substrate based on the white point of that substrate. And it's so I don't have to run a profile. I don't have to go back to press. And it's one standard. It's made it so easy for us to share our profile information with suppliers, because we just say Grackle and do you want our white point? So simple and easy to work with for our salespeople to go out and sell, and say they ask, a new customer says, well, what do I need to send you a profile? What do I need to send you? And what a proof matching a profile, or that conversation goes away. It's just send us Grackle, send us a proof match to Grackle, and it's just made it so easy that it walks you through making sure that you create your curve and your profile that are aligned to each other. It's just a very easy system. And so I think that has been a big thing for me personally, because I had to do it all. So I guess I'd say that was the first thing I was thinking of right away. But ultimately, I also work with the plate rooms, and I guess I would say screening, and especially coming from the Flexo side of the business heavily, the screening changes over time, and the development of what works now with the new plate technologies coming out, and now with the crystal, et cetera, and everything coming. I think that also has just taken printing to another level in Flexo. And we still have that option of making a digital dot or making a flat top dot, based on the needs of the products that you're printing on that press. If you're in a mid-web location, you're running thousands of feet per minute, or wide web, then you go ahead and you go with the flat top dot. Maybe you have a beauty industry print location that needs the digital dot, and they print it great every day in a narrow web situation. You can go with that also. There's just such a variety of options out there. The hardest thing now is to figure out how to optimize all these variations of products and get each of your plants what they need, the best thing that fits the needs of the customers' products that are printing there, the capabilities of the equipment, and the ink sets, etc. And then just getting it back on press and doing it every day, controlling it back to that same spot. So that's kind of what I see as a big opportunity of future change for all of the Flexo printers out there, is to be able to align to an industry standard rather than a press standard.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions too to ask you. Have you found that you've been able to standardize curves across different presses? Maybe you have different presses in your plants, different press manufacturers, but you've been able to standardize analox rollers with sticky back tapes and that type of thing, and then be able to have one set of curves and be able to move work around. Do you find you're able to do that, or?
Absolutely. So we have over time, because we also are a first certified print location, so we actually got into optimizing and making sure, like a press group. So if we have a handful of Mark Andys, they might be all aligned depending on the plant and the type of It also depends on the inks, a bunch of other things that play into this. But I can take one plant, for example, and the Marcandies were all grouped into one set of curves. All of the Omets used this one set of curves. The Comcos used one set of curves. The Nilpeters used one set of curves. And we do align all of our analoxes throughout our organization with approximately the same BCM. And then it allows for us to match color and swap things around. But optimization in the organization is very, very important. But especially in the print technologies, if you can, the mid-web people are going to do what they're going to do, and you're going to have to adjust them differently, obviously, than narrow web. But the aim points are always the same. You're still going back to G7 methodology, so it's still based on gray balance. And if you look at your TVI, if you used to run that way, which we did, you'll find that you're probably within a couple % of what you always ran to originally anyways. Mid-tone dot gain kind of thing. But yes, we do optimize all of our presses to the same methodologies and behaviors.
Very good. And I could also see where there's an importance too of even being aligned with your ink company too, with being able to match to these aims that you're aiming towards.
And it pretty much works fine as long as you just tell them to aim their hue angles at the ISO standard hue angles. And we even do that through our 7-color processes also. So it's the same methodology carried through.
Yeah, important point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Ken or Thomas? Okay, thank you. So I want to move on to question number 4. It's kind of a similar question to number 3, but adds the word efficiency. So what recent technological innovations have been most important in improving the efficiency of flexographic printing? And I'll start with Ken, please.
Sure, Jim. One of our most important value propositions is being able to give our customers a proof and a set of plates, and where they have the least amount of time setting up the press. The quicker that they can come up to color and match the proof, the better things flow for them, and therefore that creates glue that keeps our relationship strong. So this is where advanced screening comes in, specifically surface screening, microcell. We use inline UV2, which is a predecessor to the XPS technology, but we really like it, and it works very well for our customers. Surface screening is a game changer for most of our customers that print on film, even with UV inks, because it allows them to come up to color quicker and allows them to print higher densities. In addition to that, I would say just as a category, advanced color management technologies, because that's what drives our proofer to match our customers' press, and that helps them reduce their setup times. I can only say on paper that probably flat top dot technology is an improvement, like Kim was saying, in mid-web and wide web over long runs, in terms of getting more uniform impression settings, maybe longer plate life, but we don't have customers who have ever commented on that specifically. I'm just speaking theoretically. Those are the things that we do. This might seem kind of simplistic, but how we separate a customer's halftone image can make it either more difficult, or very easy for the customer to print on press. For example, using gray component replacement or GCR in customer images, or pulling cyan out of browns because it's a contaminant that could cause a color shift. Those are things that we do as a standard way of preparing our customers' files that are very, I'll call it mindful, thoughtful ways of separating the files in a way that it makes our customers more efficient on press. They wouldn't even know it necessarily, but the jobs that they're printing with our plates, and behind that, our separations, are going to print more easily and therefore more efficiently on press.
Thank you, Ken. So it sounds like you do a lot of work with making files Flexo friendly, and that's part of the expertise that you offer to your customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. And Thomas, would you like to go next with question number 4?
Yeah, I remember years ago when we would do fingerprinting, when we'd upgrade equipment, replace bulbs across the different press platforms. It was very time consuming. I think Kim mentioned it. Although I'm not in charge of that today, I wish I was. When we upgraded to our new software and our Esko hardware, I was amazed watching the team work on how easy it was for them to fingerprint the press, and the presses, as well as with the new equipment, the automation that was involved in it, and what I liked about it is it truly took the expert out of the process, and it sped that process up significantly. And if you can remember, when you made a mistake, if you were reading some print samples, having to go back and redo everything again, it was painful. So from an innovation standpoint, technical standpoint, that was incredible. The other thing that we haven't mentioned is one of the things that we've really worked hard to roll out and take advantage of is the proof approval process through Web Center. We're integrating that into our EFI workflow, and although we haven't taken full advantage of it, one of our holdups is when customers don't approve proofs in a timely manner, or if you have many different people in the proof approval process managing all those comments. You get legal guys worried about one thing, marketing people worried about that. It can be unwieldy. So that integration between the two companies has been really beneficial, and we've just scratched the surface. So we're pretty excited about that.
Great. Thank you. And Kim.
I guess when I saw this question earlier, I guess I was thinking of how it helps me. I always think of me, my personal group. And so I think for us, the most important piece of uh, innovation has been our ability to take our workflows from the ESCO system and push and pull them and connect them up with just about everything in our whole communication link, from scheduling all the way out to shipping area, trying to use all those tools and push the information so that people don't have to go over to a computer and communicate to someone that, hey, I need this, or did this happen? Is this moving? Where is it at? Just connecting up that communication link throughout the organization has helped immensely. And then our Prepress group, because of the workflows we've been able to put in place and automate so many more pieces of the process that we used to do, of course, by hand, and everyone in desktop knows it years ago how we used to work. But now taking jobs that our turnaround time was always 7 to 10 days, 7 to 10 work days in Prepress, just to work the files, get them proofed out, run the proof, have someone verify the proofs, and get them packaged and sent out. And now we actually set a standard of 24 to 48 hours. Everything has to, if it comes in, you have 24 to 48 hours to turn it back out to proof or out to plate files, depending on where it is in that process. Just so that we could see what we're actually working with at all the plants production wise. So then you're not waiting on something that's 10 days out. Of course, there's big projects. Of course, there's things that take longer than 24 to 48 hours. We can understand that and adapt, but normal work coming in, 1s, 2s, 3s, here's they come, 5s, 12s, but 200 items. Okay, but let's have so many out a day. What's that number look like? And that communication link and that whole being able to take advantage of automation for all the stepping, going ahead and once the approval comes through from the customer, having the system tell the somebody or the next piece in the process, go ahead and step it. It's been okayed by the customer automatically. A human doesn't have to touch it. Then the inspectors are just grabbing it. There's so much automation and innovation in the connection of many softwares that are coming together and working together very nicely that have changed the way we can do business.
So it sounds like a lot of automation is coming into play, and that's increased the efficiencies and being able to have effective communication with your job tracking.
Right,
This all
exactly.
plays together.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Does Ken or Thomas, do you have anything you'd like to add to question 4? Yes, question 4. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to move on to question number 5. So I'll start out with Ken on this question. What do you think will be the most important changes to the packaging and printing industries over the next 10 years?
Okay, this is just speculation, but I had a conversation with my daughter earlier in the week. She's 25 years old, and she said, "Dad, did you hear that Germany's approved this new initiative to get rid of single-serving film packaging in the next year, and Canada's following that?" And I don't, as a matter of choice, I haven't watched the news in quite some time. I don't read the paper. I just read magazines of things that I'm interested in. So I'm really not plugged into what's going on in the world by choice. But I can see where one of the biggest things that's going to be impacting our mutual business is, some type of sustainable, recyclable packaging that really makes sense to everyone, including the planet. And I have no idea what that's going to look like, but I do know that there are companies that are working on, removing inks from films so that the film can be recycled, which is great along this line. And there are companies that have developed packaging that actually degrades in sunlight, which can also be great along this line as long as it can get in the hands of the consumer. Somehow I figured that Amazon's going to work its way in there somewhere, and I really have no idea what that looks like. At one point, I thought that consumer packaging and point of purchase packaging might go away via Amazon. And that was just something that came up into my mind that probably isn't substantiated with any type of fact. And I don't no longer think that's going to be the case. But one thing's for sure, I think that Thomas and Kim and I have probably been doing this about the same amount of time. And I would say that the last 10 years of my career are significantly more dynamic than probably the first 20 years of my career combined. There is so many things happening so quickly now that it's a really exciting time to be in packaging printing.
Thank you, Ken. And Kim, would you like to comment?
I was just, when Ken was saying the last part there, I was like, you're right on. That's exactly how it is about the last 10 years being so amazing where we've went. I do think that the communication piece and being able to automate as much as possible is going to be important. I think because there's people wearing too many hats now, and that's just the way it is everywhere in every industry. And people, if we can rely on our system to make sure that we don't drop the ball, is going to be a big piece. So I think that this, and even just reducing touch points in any process, of course, everyone's trying to do that. So I see all of this coming together with the softwares and the hardware, of course, that we've been looking at, and as Prepress people that we see coming either way. And we're all used to innovation and change, even as far back to the first Mac I ever worked on. Prepress people get used to change, and they expect change, and they're also chomping at the bit to see what's the new stuff. We're usually the first ones to get the iPhones, and have to have the new Androids. We all are like that. If you're in Prepress groups, that's just the way we are. I think that I can almost see storefronts becoming more popular for even buying print, because you will be able to rely on it more. I think that customers will start to trust it more once they get used to buying without needing to talk to a customer service person or a salesperson on every order, and making sure that it just comes off without a hitch based on that order and the due dates that you're asking for right through the system. I don't know. I think there's a lot of a lot of that's going to have to happen just because there isn't enough people to work all the positions that we're filling right now with bodies. So I see it coming probably fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you. And Thomas?
Yeah, now this is the part that really excites me. As my role has changed, and yeah, Ken and Kim, I think we've been in it a long time, but my role has changed. I started in operations, so I was the guy out there watching things printed, and I was always on the back end of things. I'd get something delivered to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it would look so cool if we did this, or if we added this, or if we printed on a substrate. So I've got a couple a couple areas that I think will impact the future of packaging and printing in the next 10 years. I truly believe now that indie brands have become popular. Well, let me take a step back. I have always believed that the packaging tells a story. That's why, do you remember at the stores where they sold those, that package that had one color on it, because what they wanted the consumer to think is that we put our money in the product and not in our packaging? Well, there's a reason that didn't work. It just was ugly. So with the proliferation of indie brands, packaging has just become so much more interesting, and being able to get in front of the brand owners now, who are the guys that are passionate about the product that's in the package, and they're trying to communicate that passion through your packaging and your printing. That opportunity to get in front of these the indie brands and the people who are making is so much more exciting than having to deal with the sterile corporate world where I don't know, it just was never, it was always almost to the goal line, but for me, they never hit a home run. Getting the opportunity to work with indie brands and having them ask and collaborate has been so cool. And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. The other part of that I see is one of the things that I remember hearing about 5 or 10 years ago was direct to print onto the product. That's not something that I'm looking forward to, but as packaging becomes more complex, might not be so possible. But after I saw at one of the Label Expos, custom soccer balls being printed, I wonder what the future holds. It's always been in the back of my mind what's going to happen with direct to print. I also see trends in the supply chain changing drastically. More and more customers are asking us for more and more SKUs. They're asking us for quicker turns. I've seen customers come to me, and I'll tell you a story. I had a couple come to me, and they came up with this limoncello product, and it was a husband-wife team, and they were on the conference call with me, and they were arguing about what the package should look like. Mm-hmm. Well, what I was able to tell them with the benefits of digital printing, I told the husband, I said, let your wife win this fight, because if it doesn't work or it doesn't sell, it's not going to cost anything to change the packaging. So the ability, did he take my advice? I think he did. And you know what? It sold pretty good because it was good stuff. So the packaging didn't have to change. But from my standpoint is now these indie brands and these brand owners can pivot really quickly if their package doesn't resonate with their consumer. So there's definitely more collaboration. The other thing is I'm seeing, as we talk about collaboration, the ability to get in front of designers and brand owners to print on different substrates, different embellishments. I think when we go to the trade shows, if we ever get them back again, I'm always drawn to the embellishment sections of it. The ability to print now on hemp paper, fully recyclable films, different foils, holographic, different security seals. So, from a standpoint of being a package printer, the excitement that I'm looking forward to is all the changes that are coming, and I don't think it's going to be a threat to us.
Thank you. Yes, it sounds like you're able to utilize your expertise in, let's call it, label engineering to help enhance the packaging of your customers.
Yeah, we hope.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. All right. Gonna move on. Well, before I move on, Kim or Ken, did you have anything you wanted to add more to question 5? Okay. Move on to question 6. We'll begin with Kim on this one. How has the need for sustainability changed your business in the recent years?
So I'm definitely the wrong person to ask about this question because the only part that I ever even look at is when I'm looking at new plate technologies and new processing opportunities. And, you know, we have solvent and thermal based plate making processes, but has been some new work done on water based, water based processors. But other than that, I really don't spend a lot of time. That's not my piece of the puzzle. So this isn't a good question for me. So I'm going to let the guys speak to this one.
Okay. Well,
All right.
thank you, Kim. Ken, would you like to go next?
I'm going to put my money on Thomas for this one. It's very similar to Kim. Nothing's really changed in our operation. We like Smythe, we do both solvent and thermal process plates. And anyone that's familiar with the Cyrel Fast program knows that DuPont's got a way of handling all the developer roles that have the monomer, intertwined in the roles. And that works very well. Aside from that, we've been doing pretty much what we've been doing for a long time. We reuse the box packaging, cutting it down, using it to ship our customers' plate products to them. We don't have it internally, but we get our solvent recycled from an outside reclaimer. We for many years have been fairly green. We've got recyclable cans all over the office and in manufacturing. We've got a separate waste stream for, a truck actually comes for the recycling once or twice a week and comes from the garbage once a week. So there's actually more recycling product generated by our operation than there is garbage coming out of garbage cans. That said, I really don't have any more to contribute. So Thomas.
Thank you, Ken.
Geez, you guys threw me a softball. So those of you that know me or know Hub Labels, it's one of those areas that we're pretty passionate about, the sustainability part of it. But it's just more than about sustainability. It's about our social responsibility to our community, our kids, and the environment. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, that probably would have sounded a warm and fuzzy, yeah, but we're not interested because it doesn't benefit our bottom line. But let me read to you this new trend that's happening with in corporate America with something called a B Corp. It says that certified B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. B Corps form a community of leaders and drive a global movement of people using business as a force for good. I mean, think about that. 20 years ago, what is it? Gordon Gekko he probably would roll over in his grave had he known. I mean, and even some of the industry pundits would say that the purpose of a business is for profit. But you can see how that's shifting, and I think the impact is going to be even felt more so as the gavel is transitioned from millennials to Gen Ys and Gen Zs, because I see it in our interviews with employees or prospects. People will ask, "What are you doing for the environment?" That's important. People want to come to work and they want to feel good about where they work. So that being said, I think you guys probably can gather that the need for sustainability, at least in my business, is paramount. It's only second to the safety of my employees. So, and I think it's one of our pillars.
Thank you, Thomas. Also, what I wanted to do too is ask a final question, and your response, answer to that question is probably a good lead into this question I'd like to ask everyone. And Thomas, you're free to answer this this question first. What would be your advice for a young person who is looking at our industry with interest?
You know, it's one of those things that as I go to the younger generation and try to recruit and try to talk about how manufacturing is a pretty awesome career to get into, because most people don't view it as something that's interesting. It's I did a local tour at one of our it's a truck component manufacturing facility, and I was walking through it, and it was spectacular. It was bright white, wooden floors. I mean, these guys are making engines for big Mack trucks, which is now Volvo. And I asked one of the guys in the group who happened to work at Volvo 30 years ago, and he said there was no light in here. You had to wear slip-resistant shoes. It was dark, dingy, and nobody was happy. So what I'm trying to convey to the younger generation, whether it's whatever type of manufacturing, is that it's a different time. You can't, that stereotype of the dark, dingy, unsafe environment where you stand at your machine and you operate it from 8 to 5, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, some of the workplace practices that we're implementing, where we're asking people on the shop floor, whether you've been here a week, 5 years, or 20 years, is that we value your opinion and we want you to be part of the team. So no longer, and that's the message that I try to convey. And not only that, is that you will never go to the grocery store again and look at products on the shelves the same. And people will come back to me after 5 days of working here and they'll go, yeah, you know what? Now I go through the grocery store and I look at products that we print, and then they'll even bring me leads and they'll say, we need to print this. So the challenge for us, or for me, I think I'm a Gen Xer, is that right? Is conveying to the younger generation that it's not all about tech. We've got tech back here. We've got servo-driven machines. If you want to go into the maintenance department, we've got augmented reality glasses that you can work on repairing a machine. My maintenance team now, because of the technology that they're expected to know, you can go to high school, come out of high school, get trained by me and the companies that I work with, and you can earn $60,000, $70,000 a year, versus an old maintenance guy would be $15, $20 an hour. The challenge we have is getting out to that younger generation and showing them that this isn't a dark, dirty, stand in the corner and do your job from 8 to 5. It's truly a collaborative environment that we need to get the word out.
Thank you. Definitely. And Ken, would you like to add anything, or to answer the question, what would be your advice for a young person who is looking at our industry with interest?
You know, I'm kind of biased because I'm very passionate about what we do, and part of the reason, what drives my passion is my ability to create. So when Thomas talks about, you know, engineering embellishments and in different ways to create products, that's kind of what gets me excited. And so my answer is going to be really biased on what excites me. It might not excite the new generation of employees coming out of high school or trade school or college. But one of the neatest things I've always found about our industry is our ability to create something and then actually see it in print. And there aren't, I don't know, maybe there are other industries that you could do that in, but that's always been so very satisfying to me, is creating an idea or taking an idea. I've literally sat down with a customer on the back of a barroom napkin at a restaurant and created some of the coolest Flexo packaging that I've ever seen, exceptionally well printed, and all by tapping into the customer's head and getting some imagery on a laptop and then running with it for a couple of days and then coming back to them and saying, what do you think? That ability to create is so exciting to me. But maybe someone who's really attracted to marketing wouldn't really want to be part of the creative process. So I would say to someone who has interest, spend some time. latch on to someone that you know. We've brought interns in here. We brought my daughter's friends in here when they were trying to make decisions on grad school or not. And having that youth in our company is so exciting if they share the same passion for creativity that me and the rest of my team does. And we really do. But I'm not sure it's for everybody. I just love the ability to create things with my mind or my hands and be able to see that in a final package result. It's so cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. And Kim?
We spend a lot of time in our group, our Prepress group, working with the universities in our area and Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa area. We get people from outside of the Midwest also, but we spend a lot of time working with intern programs or getting out to job fairs that they do at the universities, et cetera, and just trying to get people to know there's more that you can. There's two ways to be an artist. There's a way to be an artist that creates working with the customer, and there's the part where then the files come in, and now we got to make it look like what the customer wants, but we have to think creatively and how we make that happen within the tolerances set up by this process called printing on this kind of press. And so I always say to them, it's still always a creative think process. I'm a fine art. I always say I'm a fine art degree person, and I wanted to have a check every week and food on my table. So I said, why don't I go towards printing rather than the art side of things, and I'll always have food to eat. So, and I always kind of tell that story to them, and they laugh because then it kind of tells the people that are still creative that this is very creative and it's still a very interesting area to be in, and it's constantly changing. And just understanding that and throwing that out to them, 'cause sometimes well, majority of the time works, because all of them are still looking. They don't know. I fell into printing by accident. All of our young people that are working for us they fell for that line or whatever. They liked what we had to say, and then they did their internship with us, and then we generally hire from our internships. But we've had really good luck on, showing that creativity and how it's used in a different way, and just letting people see the growth opportunities, because we are not a big company, but a company with a lot of options. You don't, if you're doing desktop today, tomorrow you might want to be doing something else in our area. You might want to end up working at one of our plants, being a supervisor, lead, color tech, quality tech. There's lots of opportunities once they get their foot in the door, and we kind of make sure they know that within the first year or so of working with us, so they can see that there's a path for them, and that they have options, so that they don't have to leave Smythe, but they can go to another part of the process, a different print technology. You could run a digital press. I mean, there's options if you still want to grow and change in the future, and work towards a leadership role possibly. So.
Okay. Thank you. And we're just about ready to wrap up here for the day here. So, but I did want to allow each of you to respond to a final comment, and we can start with Ken first.
Oh, it's always it's an honor for me to be standing here. I've watched Kim and Thomas speak to the trade before, and it's an honor to be on this panel alongside with them. I appreciate the opportunity to share our views, my views. It's a real trying time to be a human on planet Earth right now, and it's in this medium different than it would be if we were in a panel discussion in a room full of you all. It's really nice to be able to reach out. Connect is a really, I'll use that word loosely because we're really not connecting. It's all one way through the internet, but it's nice to be able to reach everyone that's in attendance, and hopefully there's something that you've come away with based on a comment that I've made or technology that I shared, et cetera, that'll make things a little bit better for you and your company. I wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Thomas?
Well, it also, I'll echo what Ken said. It was also an honor to be able to sit with Ken and Kim to hear their perspectives and their industry knowledge. And I would thank the listeners for taking an hour out of the day to listen to us talk about our perspective on print, packaging, and technology. It's certainly trying times. I know one of the themes that I've been trying to continue through this time is getting people. Projects have been important here to keep people's minds off of what's going on outside. But I would just encourage, if it was one thing that I'd want everybody to walk away from after sitting in on this, is getting the youth involved in package printing. It's an exciting opportunity to be in our business. So thank you. And thanks, Esko, for having me.
Thank you, Thomas. And Kim?
Again, like everyone's saying, just thank you very much, Ken and Thomas, for joining me on this presentation today, and Jim for keeping us under control. and then thanks to both Esko and DuPont for asking me to be part of it. And good luck to everyone out there who's listening in. Hopefully there's a tidbit here or there, and if not, all of us, I'm sure, would be willing to talk to anyone if wanted to contact us outside of this session at any time. So definitely reach out.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say too, it's been an honor to be the moderator of this discussion here today. And I'd like to thank Esko and DuPont for allowing me to have this opportunity. And last but not least, thank all of you, our panelists, for your contribution today. It's much appreciated, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to turn it over to Julian.
And thank you very much, everyone, for participating today. Now we are moving to our second presentation of the day, called Plate Exposure for Labels, and it's going to be presented by Mark Sandworth and Brad Gasque. Mark joined Esko back in 1997 to work on the development, marketing, and support of Esko products like screening, curves, color management, and expanded gamut. He holds 11 patents, including digital imaging, Flexo hybrid screening, press sync, and Equinox ECG. In 2011, he was inducted as the 49th member of the FTA Hall of Fame, and he received his bachelor degree in printing science from RIT and his MBA from the University of Delaware. Brad Gasque has been working with DuPont in North America as Flexo application consultant for the past 5 years. Before joining DuPont, he was in charge for the Flexo Press at the Sonoco Institute of Clemson, and he has a bachelor degree in graphic communications by the Clemson University. So Mark, Brad, welcome.
Thank you, Julian. Can you hear me? I'll do a sound check to start.
I can hear you very well. Yes.
Okay, great. Brad, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I would just like to start by thanking Kim and Ken and Thomas, right, for doing a bang up job on our panel discussion there. I have tremendous respect for all three of them. You're going to hear more about Thomas and his company Hubs Labels in this talk. But I want to start by just mentioning a note. You heard the word Brad Gasque. Corey Devlin was supposed to do this webinar with me. And many of us in the industry know Corey like a sister. But her mother has fallen ill, and Corey is spending this time with her mother. So she's not going to be doing this, but I just want to give her credit because she helped me put this entire presentation together. And Brad's going to join us for Q&A or to bail me out. Brad, are you ready to bail me out if I need to be bailed out?
I will try my best, but I mean, I just learned something new about you. I didn't know you had 11 patents. So, I mean, I'm already impressed by you now that I know you have 11 patents. I don't know if I can help you at all.
Get out of here. Brad has already bailed me out 1,000,000 times. And this is the honest truth. The kids coming out of school today, you amongst them, are already smarter than me. So that's where I'm coming from on that. So I might have the longest bio, right, in terms of length, but not necessarily the best. All right, we're going to talk about LED exposure for plates. And the reason this is kind of interesting, LED exposure for narrow web, is because this first hit the wide web industry. We can make plates that are perfectly uniform over 80 inches or so. And now it's just shifting into the narrow web industry. So this section here, today's session, hosted by DuPont and Esko, is really focused on narrow web. I want to talk about some technology that's really going to affect narrow web. And that technology is LED plate exposure. So speaking of Corey, a person who many of us think of as a sister, there's a picture of Corey with her backlight unit. I would say that that is the present and the past on the left. And
Hey,
the
Mark.
future, yeah.
Hey, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't see your presentation, so I didn't want you to
Yes,
continue.
Mark, you need to share your screen. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Action, enable screen sharing, screen 2, share.
There you are.
And, okay. Can
There we go.
you see my screen? Thank
Yes,
you, Brad.
yes, we can.
By the way, Julian, how much time do we have for this? Because I can make this variable in length.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what I say, you're going to take as much time as you need, right?
But say something anyway. I'm going to say 3:11, right?
Okay.
Eastern Standard Time. So, all right, we're going to talk about LED plate exposure for narrow web, specifically focused on narrow web. Now, what is LED plate exposure? It's a new type of exposure technology. In the past, all photopolymer plates were exposed in backlights, and these are just tubes, UV tubes, that are set in a line to give as uniform as possible exposure over the entire plate. But the future is really about LED. And if we were talking about some of the big changes that are happening in the next 10 years, I thought the panel that we just heard hit them fairly well. A lot of it's going to have to do with sustainability and remote workflow and things like that. But one of the big ones is going to be a shift in plate making from backlight to LED, right? So we're going to talk about LED plate exposure, but we're going to talk about some of the other technologies that kind of complement it. So I'm going to talk about crystal screening, and I'm going to talk about the print control wizard. I'm going to share with you Corey's slides, who is going to talk about fast plate processing. So moving from solvent to thermal. A few years ago, people would say you can't get the quality out of thermal that you need for high-end process. We think that's different now for a few different reasons. And we're going to talk about a plate material. I think we're getting to a point where you don't have to have 10 different types of plates in your shop. One plate for process, one plate for line, one plate for one type of press with one sticky back. It's in the narrow web field, it's moving toward really one plate material that can satisfy all your needs. Before I go much further, I want to extend a special thank you to Thomas, who was just on our panel discussion. We're going to show you some of the things that Hub Labels is doing. They implemented LED plate exposure with crystal screening and the print control wizard, and are using EFX plates and thermal processing. And I'm also going to share with you some stuff about Hammer packaging. I mean, both of these companies are very, I'll say, altruistic. They are looking at how do we make the world a better place. Allowing us to share their technology with a group of people from the label industry is kind of a benevolent thing. There's not that many companies on this call who might purchase labels from them, but they're both companies that think at a higher level. How do we make the world a better place? And if the world's a better place, of course, it'll be a better place for Hub Labels and Hammer Packaging as well. So let's dig into this revolution, right? What's going to happen in the next 10 years? You know, it's a fact that the world is in the midst of a lighting revolution, and it's all based on one technology. The technology it's based on is the light emitting diode, the LED. And it's going to change everything about how we live and how we illuminate. So it's even used already in traffic applications. It's used in sign and display. Probably everybody here is looking at a display light that has LED behind the panel. But even the large signage now, you know, walk down Times Square, that used to be a bunch of neon. Now it's LED technology. It's used in automotive. It's used in household lighting. You can go to the store and buy LED lights, a little bit more expensive, but they last way, way, way longer. Now they're even getting them in kind of warmest color temperatures to give you that kind of same feeling you get with incandescent. Just for the heck of it, a while ago, I typed in longest lasting flashlight. And this is even an old screenshot here, but it came up with this flashlight, $900 flashlight, right? It lasts 50,000 hours, right? That's almost 6 years. Now, I went out and bought one of these like 3 years ago, right? And I put it in my closet and I turned it on and it's still on. And every day I check it, right? I really can't wait till 3.7 years from now to check it again, just to see if they're right about this. But the technology is pretty amazing. One of the things they talk about is the illumination uniformity. And we're going to talk about illumination uniformity and how that affects flexographic plate quality, and in turn, how that affects flexographic print quality. But LED is hitting the entire world, and graphic arts and printing is no exception. When was a question yesterday, what kind of curing was used for some UV ink samples? I think that was actually UV, the answer to that question. But people who know a lot about inks tell me that within 5 years, all ink will be LED cured instead of UV. What does that mean? A lot lower energy costs, a lot less heat generated, right? LED lighting is inside spectrophotometers. There's the X-Rite Exact, the most common spectrophotometer in the world. LED lighting in due time will be used in all viewing booths. So viewing booths are just at the cusp of getting LED lights balanced to match 5,000 Kelvin in the different conditions. And the people who know illumination tell me it will all be LED in a certain period of time. So you couple that with the fact that other types of lighting, as our planet drives to become more sustainable, are being outlawed because of sustainability issues. And that includes, all the old heat kind of generated lamps. Your regular light bulb passes current through a wire which generates heat that lights up, and all your fluorescent tubes are going to be banned. Different bans in different areas of the world at different times, but they're all going to be banned in favor of LED, right? So LED is coming to a plate room near you. And at the end of this, I'm going to show you LED at Hub Labels, and I'm going to show you LED at Hanwha Packaging. First of all, this technology was introduced at Drupa 2016 and has been moving into the industry ever since that point. And what's kind of new now is this 4835 device has been out there for about a year or so, and how it's really impacting labels. It has won every award that we have entered it for. And it really wins for three reasons, consistency, quality, ease of use, and sustainability. I guess that's four, right? So we're very active in the FTA in the United States here, and as well as the Idea Alliance and Printing Industries of America. And it's won all the awards that they have to give out. So let's just take a look at how these pieces fit together. This is an exposure unit. It does not look like an exposure unit. It looks like something, somebody said it looks like something out of Star Wars, right? When that head moves back and forth. But we're connecting this, not only is this technology that works real standalone, so you can just purchase this standalone, but you can also take that exposure unit and purchase a CDI that fits with it. This is what Thomas has down at Hub Labels, and I'll show you their system at the very end of this. But these work independently, and I think Rory showed yesterday how the plate loader works. So he showed a movie that without any human intervention, all the human has to do is set a raw piece of plate material on top of that bed on the left, and it will bring the plate in, image it, bring it out, bring it down to the exposure unit, and expose the plate, all without any human intervention. So just to give you a look at the head of that, it's a moving source LED. And the exposure uniformity is really due to two things. First of all, you can make LED lights far more uniformly spaced than bank lights. To start, every bank light is a tube. So you're starting with a directionality concept, whereas LEDs are little point sources. And if you put them in a grid that's uniformly spaced, your lighting will be uniformly spaced. But then if you move that, as I show on this diagram, you will get even more even lighting uniformity. So just to show you some of the key pieces here, we're bouncing back and forth. So we have this available in 3 different sizes. So the first size was the 5080. The second size was the 4835. That's what most label printers go with. And just being introduced within the next couple of weeks is the 4260 device. So this one here is a big one. This is a 50 by 80 device, but it makes a nice slide. So what are the components of this? First of all, we have that head that moves back and forth. In that is the main exposure and the back exposure. You can see it goes underneath there. So there's a row of LED lights in that bottom as well, right? And it's traveling in that direction as you saw in the previous slide. Very easy to access the UV head. So if there's any maintenance issues that have to be performed on these devices, there's very little that the tech has to do to get in there, right? We worked with some industrial designers, and this is based on fitting the average person's height, right? But it works for smaller people and larger people as well. And it fits the CDI for the same heights. And all the electronics are put in the front of the machine instead of the back of the machine. And then it's the easiest user interface you could really ever hope for in a machine, right? So it's really a Windows-based system, but you start it up and the interface has all the basic parameters. You can, like, it's as easy to make a plate is you call up the plate you want to make. So you type in DuPont XPS, you put the plate on and you hit start. So very, very user-friendly. So what are the big reasons why we would do LED? So remember this one. Number one reason is consistency. I'm going to show you that it can also make a better plate. And by the way, I did not thank Jim Schultz, who was a moderator in the last discussion. And he is one of the best plate people I know. And he would even tell you that this makes the most consistent plates he's ever seen. And he and I were involved at both Hub and at Hammer. And he did more of the work, more of the valuable work than me. And I just wanted to thank Jim as well. If Jim Schultz tells you a plate technology is good, you can bank on it, because he's like the most honest person in the world. He can't even pretend to advocate a product that he does not truly believe in. So what are the things here? So how does LED compare to backlight? And what are the big differences here? And first of all, it's a 10 times longer lifespan. You know, backlight lasts for 500 hours. So calculate how many hours your backlight unit is on, you know, per week, and you can figure out how long that's going to last. But also you have to calculate the fact that you have to heat up bank lights and turn them on before you actually expose the plate, blah, blah, blah. So you get about 500 hours. LED is about 5,000 hours, at least 10 times as long, right? And in that 10 times, it's actually going to use far less energy. So you're going to save on energy costs, right? There's no warm-up needed. And warm-ups are one of the great causes of variation, because very few plate makers follow the right procedure in warm-ups. And even if they do, there's no way to get completely uniform heat and illumination across the entire frame. So there's a lot less heat. Heat is a variable. Some people could argue that if you had the same heat everywhere, you'd get a decent plate. I think most polymer chemists, like if you talk to the doctors, the PhDs at DuPont who work in Parlin, they would tell you you really just want to get heat away from that. You want the polymerization process to happen as close to room temperature as possible. And it has no mercury. So I think we've already said the tubes, a backlight tube is a fluorescent tube with mercury inside there. And that must be disposed of according to the regulations for hazardous waste, which are, you know, you have local and then you have state and you have federal, and you have to comply with all of those. Whereas an LED light can just be thrown in the trash can. So let's talk about some basic plate concepts here, and then we're going to talk about some print concepts. But plate concepts, everybody knows we have back exposure and we have main exposure. And with an LED system, we have the 2 types of exposure. We have back and we have main. Somewhere in the middle there, we have a plate, right? And it starts with a raw material. It's all monomer, right? And on the top of that is that carbon, that black carbon layer that we expose on the CDI. So after exposure, it has holes in it. And that's how the image gets through, right? But let's look at what the back exposure does. A lot of you kind of know all this already, right? The back exposure creates the floor. More back exposure is a thicker floor, which is a thinner relief. And the main exposure, of course, creates the dot, right? So both of these exposures are far more consistent in the world of LED light than they are in the world of backlight. But let's take a look at some problems. We'll start by looking at the relief height. You get way better relief height uniformity with an LED unit than you do with a backlight. So we'll start with that, then we'll talk a little bit about main exposure, right? So let's take a dot where the floor is too low, right? If that floor is too low, you're going to have dot instability. And that instability is in processing, actually a low floor, even if you're thermal processing it. If you have to go way down to the floor, those dots wiggle a little bit more in thermal processing, could get wicked off if it's too deep. And it's also on press, right? But if the floor is too high, you have a chance of accidentally printing the floor, right? So let's put a little bit of ink in there. And if you have too low of relief, the floor may print. Now, I've talked to a lot of printers about this. Very large plates. This is a problem in narrow web printing, but it's a bigger problem in wide web printing, right? So very large plates that don't have a lot of image, you can actually tend to print the floor, right? Smaller plates, it's not that much of a problem, but it can be a problem. If you have a, whatever, 14-inch by, 18-inch plate, right, on a cylinder, you could end up printing the floor. But no matter what, however serious the problem is or is not, pressmen complain about it. You send a plate out to the press room with 15 thousandths of relief and you're going to have an unhappy pressman. Let's take a look at these exposure technologies and see, well, why is LED a more uniform exposure than a backlight? And it's really based on the fact that the backlight are individual tubes. The vertical lines in our graph there are a graphical representation of individual tubes. And these are the specs from the vendors. You can ask them what's the intensity variation of their tubes. And they're going to tell you it's greater than 10%, right? And you can apply that 10%. You could think of that as, all right, well, I'm making a back exposure and I know my back exposure time should be 60 seconds, let's say, right? Well, that means it could vary really from 44 to 66 seconds, right? That's a pretty big amount of variation. And you can definitely see that in the floor. Whereas on an LED unit, it's exactly the same everywhere. The LED lights are put in like a checkerboard grid, and they're spaced so closely together with some calculations so that the light from each LED overlaps the light from the others in a perfectly uniform field, right? Then we move it on top of that. So it's exactly the same. If you're aiming for, can't remember what that y-axis is, if whatever your exposure intensity is, you're going to get the same exposure intensity everywhere. And I'll talk a little bit about main exposure now, because people have asked me, well, why is it that anybody can see that the floor is more consistent, the back exposure is more consistent on LED, but people don't talk about the main exposure consistency on LED. And the only reason is that it's easy to see the back exposure inconsistency because you can measure the relief height. And if you have a plate and you measure the relief height and it's off by 4 thousandths across a large plate, you can see that you're not getting uniform exposure. You have that same non-uniformity in the main exposure, but your uniformity in the main exposure is harder to see. But you may have 1% dots on one side of the plate that are holding, and on the other side of the plate that are falling over and printing dirty just because of that variation. So it's critical in both, to have consistent uniformity is critical for your main and your back. It's easier to see in your back exposure, but the inconsistency that you have with backlights is in both. Let's take a little bit closer look at the a dot and what happens when you have variation. So some of you know, maybe some of you don't, the spec for a 67 thousandths plate, which about 95% of you in the label industry are using, right, is 20 thousandths. That's your aim, 20 thousandths relief. And they also say the spec is ±2. Now, you can make a good plate ±2. If you can get better, perhaps you should, right? But it's really even hard for bank to hold that from plate to plate over time to time, day to day, week to week, month to month, right? So large plates here, this is a spec on an 80-inch plate. When we went in and just asked the customer, could we measure some of your large plates? And they were measured at having a variation of plus or minus 4, right? So, or even more, right? So there's a huge difference in the back exposure. Well, let's say it this way. There's a huge difference in the floor variation or the relief variation between XPS and banklight. And that really just shows that there's a large variation in exposure between XPS and bank. XPS, far more consistent. So let's take a look. Let's just kind of sum up these topics. Digital back exposure in an LED unit. Every LED is being monitored. And if it changes in any way, shape, or form, the current to that changes so that the output illumination stays the same, right? So the floor that you get doesn't depend on whether you preheated the bulbs or whether it happened to be really hot that day or whether it was in the back of the unit that had a lot of heat versus the front that did not have as much heat. All that is standard on an XPS system, right? So that 1,000, I've asked numerous people, is this really, really true? And Jim Schultz and I measured it when we were at Hammer, and it was really, really true. Our relief heights were plus or minus 1,000s. And this obviously makes more consistent printing on press. No preheating of tubes, because preheating, of course, can cause variation or variation in preheating, but it's also kind of a pain for operators to have to do. It's taking their time away, and it's reducing productivity. And no UV tube exchange or disposal. You don't have to worry about that anymore. All of you have probably slightly different ways of disposing of your tubes, and that's just one of the headaches in running a business that will go away when you convert to LED exposure. Then it has this thing called constant dwell time. So this is as geeky, I think, as this gets. What is dwell time? Dwell time is the difference in time between when you back expose a plate and when you main expose a plate. So this is a picture of a dot with 10 minutes dwell time, or less than 10 minutes dwell time, whatever we use for the minimum dwell time. In other words, we back exposed the plate, we put it immediately in the CDI, and we imaged it. Then we main exposed it and processed it. But a lot of plate makers will take out a whole box of plates or some number. They know they have 8 plates to make in the morning. They'll take 8 plates out. They'll back expose them all. Then they main expose or they image one at a time as the jobs come to the CDI, right? And you can see here that there is a difference in the shoulder. So that dot, there's also a difference in the slight difference in the actual size of the dot. It shrinks a little bit if you let it dwell for a long, long time. Whether that's good or bad can be debated. We think it's bad. And the constant dwell time eliminates the variation that you get. So on an XPS unit, every single plate that you expose, or let's say XPS, because remember, you're going to put the plate down, you're going to call up the list of plates, you're going to hit XPS, and you're going to hit start. That's going to have the exact same relationship between your back exposure and your main exposure.
Hey, Mark, so I just want to step in here. I think this is an awesome point that I think people fully don't understand in production when making plates. Because like you said, so many people do exactly what you said. They'll take a whole box of plates or just enough plates to make a job and back expose all of them back to back to back to back. And then throughout a shift, make these plates. Well, the first plate you make on that shift is going to be totally different than the last plate. And I have customers that do this, and I tell them about this dwell time effect, and I show them these slides, and they say, oh, well, we don't see it whenever we look at the 50% dot, in our control strip. Well, you're only going to see this in these really small dots. They're going to cause you issues on press, that are going to give you dirty printing or, lean over. if they don't have nice broad shoulders. So I think this is a really important topic that you hit, that the XPS does a really good job at being consistent at.
Yeah, one thing, Brad, I've noticed, like when we go into a shop, we'll ask them, do they understand dwell time? And some people just flatly admit now they never thought about it, and some people know it. Some people say they understand it. And but even if they say, okay, we're going to stop that practice, we're going to take plates out one at a time, we're going to back expose, then image, then main expose. You always kind of wonder, do they really do that, right? When production gets heavy and they have 8 plates to make and they only have time to make 7 and they got to get plates out the door, it's more productive to back expose all your plates at once because you run into bottlenecks. We're going to talk about some of those bottlenecks as we go forward, but thanks, Brad, and jump in anytime you want. I appreciate your feedback. So really, you could say this: a short dwell time increases highlight dot stability. Here's why. If you make your dwell time really short, it's not only building up your floor, but it's sensitizing your plate. It's kind of charging the monomers in there to be really ready to polymerize once they get hit by the main exposure, right? So you can get much more stable dots. Here's a picture of Ali looking at a dot stability chart that we made and we were checking out. If you take a look at just the ability to hold small dots, whereas in the past, a certain set of parameters would give you an unstable highlight dot. You can see dots falling over. You can have a more uniform and a larger, slightly wider shoulder and no dots falling over if you have a reduced dwell time. So there's really 2 things about dwell time. You want it to be constant the same time, but the shorter the better, right? Let's take a look at a couple elements. Brad, here's a target that you've printed once or twice in your life. I shouldn't mention customer names because I know you printed these and sent them to me, and I analyzed them, and you and I put in a couple XPS systems and sold some screening with these. But for now, I just want to look at that. I want to show you that fade out circular vignette, right? So here it is. We back exposed and we had 5 minutes of dwell time. And here we back exposed, we waited 60 minutes and then we imaged and main exposed it, right? So you can see a difference. This is that circular vignette again. You can see a difference. This is the same plate material. Now, you could argue, did we have the back exposure, main exposure right, and all that stuff? And this was, not conducted with all those variables, but this is the same plate with the exact same exposure time in the crystal, XPS LED exposure system. So put a plate down, put that, we'll image the plate, put it down on the LED unit, press the start button, and this is what we got. So pretty big difference here. The other thing that's interesting is just the UV tubes. Hey, Brad, you don't happen to know, there are people at DuPont who have told me this. They can tell the direction of the UV tubes by looking at these dots, right? And of course, on the LED exposure, it's a more uniform dot. It's got a better shoulder, right? It's more conical and less concave, right? But you can't tell the direction that that plate was placed on the exposure unit. But Brad, you don't happen to know the direction of the bulbs on this, do you?
I don't know, not on this sample now.
Yeah, I think Mazer was telling me, and some of the people in Parlin at DuPont, they can tell these things. So yeah, it's back to if you don't have uniform light, you will not get uniform dots, no matter how beautiful of a mask you create. So, LED plate exposure technology is a great complement to crystal CDI imaging technology. So let's take a look at some of these things. So what is this? What does all this do? Well, first of all, less waste because you have more consistent plates, more consistent print too, right? Constant dwell time for increased exposure consistency. We talked about that. By the way, any plate you put in here is a flat top plate. So part of the future, if we go back to the discussion with that Jim led with Kim and Ken and Thomas, what's going to happen over the next 10 years? Well, I think traditional photopolymer plates are still going to be around 10 years from now. I would bet money that they will be around. But I think development on photopolymer plates is going to be made for LED. So most photopolymer plates today were developed for the exposure systems of yesterday, right? But when you develop them for LED, there's going to be some different characteristics, right? And one of the things that is true is that every plate is a flat top plate in an LED exposure unit. Now, the plate we're going to show you that Jim Schultz says is great, so then I believe it. Whatever Jim says, I swear to, is EFX, DuPont EFX. That is actually a flat top plate being exposed in a flat top exposure unit, an LED, and I'll show you some of the results we get from that. So, and this is compatible with all of our new screens. I'm going to talk about our new screens now, so I won't digress into this. All right, so let's look at some of the other complementary technologies. And as I said at the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit about crystal screening and the print control wizard. And then Corey was going to talk about a little bit about FAST and Cyrel, and I'll do that, and Brad can chime in when he's ready. So what you see there is a dot, and on the surface of that dot are little cells, right? And the ability to hold those little cells is much better with an LED unit than it is with a bank unit. So we're kind of using this to combining technologies together to get really the best quality that we can get. So this screening is called crystal screening. And the first obvious question is, what is crystal screening, right? I can show you some dots, and the best single graphic I could think of to show crystal is these dots that have little teeny cells in them. And but let me give a definition here. A crystal screen is an AM/FM transitional screen. You could call that a hybrid screen if you want, with or without surface patterns. So that's a mouthful. Let's break these down. What is a transitional screen, and what is a surface pattern? Let's define these two things, right? So a transitional screen, to understand what that is, it's a combination of an AM and an FM screen, because there's basically two kinds of screens in the world. A screen can be uniform. That's an AM screen. All the dots are equally spaced. They vary in size. Or a screen can be random. That's an FM screen. They're all the same size. Every dot is the same size. What varies is the number of dots, or the distance between the dots. And then when they group together, they kind of make some weird looking patterns and things like that. But there's basically two things you can do with the screen. It can either be ordered or random. So about 20 years ago, Esko developed hybrid screens, and Esko still owns these original patents today. And let me describe what that is. That is an AM screen. Right now, you're looking at nothing but an AM screen. But let's just say that in flexography, we knew that anything below 9 pixels, which is about 19 microns at 4,000 dpi, let's say we knew anything below that would cause problems on the plate and in printing, right? So we have this whole area of problems now. So we can't do an AM screen everywhere, right? What we can do is, at that point, we can convert into an FM screen. And at that point, going to lower gray values, we don't have smaller dots. Even the very smallest isolated dot is still the same size. So we don't have smaller dots, but we can make, by having less dots, we can allow us to fade to zero. And there's very few facts in flexo printing, but let me state this. This is almost a categorical fact. Let me state this. The only way to fade to zero in flexo is to transition to some degree to an FM dot. We'll leave it at that, right? So these are some different kinds of screening here. And by the way, I'm doing a webinar for the FTA tomorrow, and I'll be doing more Esko webinars as we go that just talk about screening. These are some of the different technologies that we have in crystal screening. So as I go from the top to bottom, we can start deleting the dots to form a transition screen so that we can fade to zero. We can delete the dots and move them around so that we make the transition point less obvious. We can mix big dots with small dots so that we can add support to some of the small dots. But I think the general direction is to try to use transitional screens with a smaller range, right? So instead of having like the first 10% or 15% of our grayscale taken up with FM, we want to shorten it. And LED exposures is helping us to shorten that screen range. So we're never using dots up above, let's say, 25 pixels or more. Everything is below that as we go forward. And by doing that, we're allowing the same screening to be used for any plate. So in the past, customers would evaluate artwork and they would go in and say, oh, for this drop shadow, I want to use, this HD C36 screen. But for the rest of this, I want to use a straight circular AM screen. They were trying to mix and match, and that's time consuming and makes things complex. We're getting outside of that. So we're going to start paying a little bit of attention to these pixel sizes. And right there, this is, if you could blow that up, this is a 12 pixel dot. You could call this a C12. So I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to venture away a little bit from LED plate exposure. And I just want to explain some concepts in screening. Then I'll try to tie it back together and describe why is it that LED plate exposure makes better plates with these kind of isolated dots. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at min dot. In the world of an AM min dot, well, actually, I could say it this way. The world of AM min dots is pretty simple. It's very easy to think about. If I go from a 2% to a 1%, or a 2.4 to a 1.2, the dot's just getting smaller. The distance between them is not changing. The frequency, the number in any area is not changing. All that's happening is the dot's becoming smaller. Now, just as a reference to show these side by side, around a 1.2 AM dot is about the size that you can hold with DuPont Cyrel EFX running through a fast thermal processor like a TD2000. And you can get a beautiful, nice light highlight there, but you will still see a little bit of a break. If you want to fade down to 0, you've got to go beyond that. But let's take a look at an FM dot. So we can hold that dot right there. That's easily held. So instead of 1, we're down to 0.8. We can hold that on an EFX plate, right? Process exposed on an XPS exposure unit, processed with a TD2000. We can hold that. We can also hold this. But let me show you what's happening here. Notice that the dot size is not changing. What's changing is the number of dots. As I go from 0.8 down to 0.4, it's the exact same dot size. What changes is the number of dots, right? This makes exposure calculations quite complex, right? And I'm going to show you how the print control wizard will help us reduce that complexity. But notice here, just a point here, this is a C25 dot. Now, if you got really bored in your life, you could count those pixels. And if you counted them, there'd be 25 pixels there, right? You could also get an approximation of the diameter of this. Now, when we image this on a mask, we intentionally image it just with a little bit of rounding, right? And that little bit of rounding makes that very, very round on the mask. But that's C25. But let me talk about the 2 dimensions, because in an FM dot, in an AM dot, there's only 1 dimension, right? There's dot size. So for any one screen rolling, if you're printing 150 line screen, there's 150 dots in an inch everywhere, always, right? But with an FM dot, there's 2 dimensions, right? There's not always 150 lines in an inch. There actually never is, because we've deleted some of the dots. So there's a C25 at 0.8 and 0.4. Let's look at a C12 at 0.8 and 0.4. Let's take a look at these numbers. So you can see that the C12 dot is a much, much smaller dot than the C25 dot. So if somebody says, if you're running an AM screen, somebody can say, well, what's your min dot? You can say, oh, it's 1.2%, something like that. Somebody says, oh, you're running a transitional screen. You're running one of these new crystal screens by Esko. What's your min dot? Really, you'd have to say it's a 0.8% at C12, right? Or you could maybe say it's a 0.4% at C25. There's this relationship there. And the math gets kind of difficult, and it's different for every plate material. So to do that math for you, to do that logic for you, we created the print control wizard. It will optimize the screen. And Ken has printed some of these. So has Thomas, and at Hub Labels and Hammer Packaging. We'll show you some of their stuff. This is the wide web chart, but let's just take a look at this. This is a MinDOT control strip that's automatically measured by an X-Rite I1IL. So those numbers there have to do with pixels. These are the 2 dimensions. Gotta understand those 2 dimensions of the FM min, right? So there's a 9 pixel dot and there's a 16 pixel dot. Now let's look at the other dimension, right? So at the 1-to-1 point, that's a pure AM screen. That is the lowest gray level at which no dots are deleted. Then in the automatic measurement is the 1/2 pattern. That means half of the FM dots have been deleted. Then we can look at the 1/4 dot, right? 1/4 of the dots remain, 3/4 have been deleted. So what we're really going to do is we're going to analyze that mathematically. Now, I suppose a human could do that with a handheld densitometer going back and forth. And if you want to, be my guest. But the print control wizard is going to analyze that. And it's going to tell you both things. It's going to tell you your optimum percentage. We'll come back and say 0.8%. And it'll tell you optimum pixel size. It'll come back and say C16, right? I like to look at these things visually. Jim Schultz is the same way. Ken Pavette and I know Kim are both the same way. We love technology, but we still trust our eyes. So you can take a look at this test target. And you can see the different cell sizes, the different, I should say, spot sizes, right? Highlight dot sizes, C19 through C26. And here's a C19 dot. I think this is from Hammer Packaging, actually. And this is on an EFX plate exposed on a crystal XPS exposure unit, processed. This is getting long to say all this stuff. Be the last time I say it. Processed in a Cyril TD2000. All the stuff we're talking about today, right? And you can see those dots fading down to 0. We could almost print without a min dot at all. Jim Schultz says, I wouldn't recommend it, even if we think we can. We got to have plates that can print for 1 million impressions, stand up to any kind of Pressman's, impression control. So the pre-CW, the print control wizard, will always tell you something higher than your eye will tell you. It wants to be a little bit conservative. But for those of you who have been around Flexo a long time, you could tell that's a nice highlight. And that is easy to get with thermal plates today. Let's talk a little bit about surface patterns. And I told Julian I was going to be done by 3:11. And I think we also agreed that he owes me a dinner and a beer if I finish by that time. So we will see if I finish by that time. So let's talk about surface patterns, right? Almost all of you know that Analox rollers have cells. And they have cells for all of the known reasons of fluid mechanics that solids don't adhere well to smooth surfaces. If you spill milk on a glass table, it's going to take a non-randomized pattern. If you spill milk on a table that has a pattern in it, or if you sand down your glass table, you're going to get in trouble from your spouse, but it'll make a nice uniform milk stain. So liquids need cells, right? And the world has known how to put cells in solids for a long time. Esko still owns those original patents. Some of them have probably expired by now, right? And anyone who's been around this industry a while has seen cases, usually on film, right, where there's a huge difference between the normal plate surface and the surface pattern surface. But we want to take this beyond solids. We want to put them in half-tone dots. And we get much more uniform half-tone dots. If any of you have problems with dot shadowing or dot donuts or things like that, again, mostly on non-porous substrates, on films, crystal screening with cells throughout the entire dot is a great candidate to solve those problems. So let's talk a little bit about cells. Where are cells put in the file? Well, the cells are actually, you could say it a couple of different ways, but the cell pattern is actually put into the digital file, the len pattern, but it turns from a pixel into a cell when you image it on the CDI. And in doing that, the CDI, there's a control in there. It's called your pixel boost. You can change your pixel boost setting to get different size cells. So one of the standard tests that we have done is we run a step test. We have these plate exposure wedges. Jim and I did this at both Hub Labels and Hammer Packaging within the last 60 days, 90 days. Look at a calendar. And if you look at this, what you see there is really a pixel that's not even a cell yet. But as we grow larger, you're going to see the land area increase and the cell area decrease. So at this point, at 280, the cell is completely landlocked. That's almost like an analog roller cell. And different sets of conditions like different cell patterns. But believe it or not, the optimum cell pattern is right around 240, right around where the land almost connects, but not quite connects. That's the optimum for most cases. But we can even go to the left of that for extremely high coverage conditions like white plates. You can go to the right of that for extremely low volume conditions, real high-end process. But really, it's easy enough to find out. You don't need to do all the theory. You can just print a plate like that. And if you print a plate like that, you analyze it different ways. Here, I'm just showing you different densities that you get on this plate. By the way, at Hammer, we had densities up around 180 cyan, which is a nice problem to have. There's a lot of ways they can fix that. Very easy to print lower densities in the world of Flexo. Very hard to print higher densities. Sometimes you can't get higher with a certain analogs, ink, plate, and substrate, right? But density, you can look at that and you can say, well, which one's the highest density? And we can pick an exposure value somewhere between there, which is, I don't know, 240 or 250. I can't read the writing upside down there. But you can also look at it for quality. You can look at it for dot quality, quality of your positive type, quality of reverse. Usually they're about the same. At the point where your density is optimized, the quality of your line work and reverses is also optimized. But a real critical step in all of this. So we're talking about surface patterns, and that kind of brings us back to this topic. What do surface patterns have to do with LED? Why should we use LED plate exposure for these fine surface patterns? Now, I have another talk that I'm giving for the FTA, I think next month, that has a lot of different surface patterns in it. But I'm going to just show you an example of some surface patterns here. Here's a round top plate, right? And we tried to put a WSI screen, which is 1,414 line per inch. You can write that down if you want. Somebody can try to derive that mathematically and tell me where that comes from. Mazer could do it. I don't think he's on this webinar. Here is the exact same pattern exposed as a very small dot in a flat top plate, right? So DuPont has the ability. I took these. Brad, these are your slides. I dressed them up a little bit here. So DuPont has the ability to image plates and measure plates. And these photo micrographs, actually, they show the depth with the color. But you can see, this could be a long discussion. I don't want to make it a long discussion because then I will owe Julian a beer and a dinner. But if you look at the width to depth ratio, we get much better cells, much finer cells with a flat top plate. We get the finest cells of all with a flat top plate imaged under LED exposure, right? So you can see the cell we can make the cells smaller, therefore we can make them closer together. We're going to be taking advantage of that with some of the patterns I'll talk about in my next webinar for the FTA. And we can make them deeper. Usually when you make a cell smaller, it becomes shallower, but we can make these cells deeper. That all happens because of the XPS plate exposure, just a more critical plate exposure. It's more of a one-to-one plate exposure than than you can get with backlight, and way, way, way closer to 1-to-1 than you can get with backlight with a round top dot. All right. Let's now, on the kind of the subject of complementary technology, let's talk about fast plate processing and Cyrel EFX. So I can just tell you that I have never seen, for sure, a thermal plate. We should get Jim Schultz to weigh in here because I respect, he does more field work than me. I've never seen as good of a thermal plate as I've seen with Cyrel EFX exposed in LED. And I would say they're as good as the best solvent plates I've seen. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. I'd love to see if Schultz would agree with that. But, you know, what is Cyrel Fast? This has been around for a while, and it has been a great friend of the printer, right? The ability to make a fast plate and not have to deal with all the issues around solvent. And it's kind of introduced a concept called just-in-time plate making. And that means, you know, we have there's these mega trends, just-in-time inventory and a few different things. Just-in-time plate making means you only make plates on demand. And that's why it's been a real friend of the printer, because the printer doesn't want to have stacks and stacks of plates waiting for the press. And because of time constraints, we don't always have time to make plates days ahead of time. And if a plate goes bad in the press, you don't have to take the job out and reschedule. Brad, you know, in your experience, when you're working at a printer who has a fast system, when they have a bad plate on press, do they reschedule the job or do they just wait and make a new plate?
Yeah, many times they just wait because it would take more time to pull the job and reset another job up. So they just wait and have a new plate within 45 minutes, sometimes even quicker than that, depending on the size of the plate. Yeah,
I'll show you some numbers in a second that are less than that. I mean, but with solvent, there's no way they would wait, right? Because you're not going to wait 3.5 hours, right?
Correct. No way you would let a press sit that long not making money.
Right. So there's you know, what are the basic facts about the fast system? It is faster processing, less time than solvent, lower cost. DuPont will work with you and add up the costs, you know, and there's ways to calculate that, but it's really lower cost than solvent, right? Physically smaller device. So look at the plate processing units now. Brad, how many times smaller would you say the TD2000 is to like the equivalent solvent inline system? It's about a third the size, quarter the size?
A third, and then you don't have to have a dryer. So one less piece of equipment as well.
Right. So yeah, it's about less than, you know, like 10 to 20% of the amount of space, right?
Yeah.
If you're fighting space issues. And then overall improved performance. And it's totally compatible with the digital workflow. That's what we like about it, right? You know, our customers are all about how fast can we do this, and we sell that, you know, hey, with the automation engine, we can automate all this, and we can screen, and we can rip jobs now that used to take 45 minutes to rip, we can rip them in 45 seconds. Then you get to the plate making, but it still takes 4 hours to make a plate. We love the fact that you can use fast processing and make a plate in 30 minutes. So much more simplified workflow, get rid of the solvent, and you know, reduce your plate making time. Here's some numbers, Brad, that Corey put together. So we have back exposure. We'll look at the steps first and we'll add the numbers. Back exposure, main exposure, processing, drying, post exposure, and finishing. Right. So if we go to a solvent workflow, it's about a minute back exposure, 10 to 12 minutes main exposure, 20 to 40 minutes in processing. Right. There's the big one, 120 to 180 minutes in drying, and, you know, 10 to 15 minutes in post-exposure and finishing. Now, you know, given that we can take out that drying time, let's see what the throughput would be with a fast system. So we still have a minute. The back exposure and the main exposure are the same. The processing is 12 minutes, so we're saving some time there. There is no drying, so that's the big savings, right? And Brad, why does it require less post-exposure and finishing?
I'm not sure why here, but many times I know people increase the the light finishing times because the plates in solvent feel a little tackier, just because it's right out of the dryer and the washout.
Right.
They're a little tackier because they're still, the surface is a little bit swollen.
Right.
It's tackier, so therefore you increase the light finishing times to drop the tackiness. Whereas the fast, since there is no swelling, there's no absorbing of a solvent, you don't have that fill to the plate.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So there's a pretty big difference here, right? The difference is in the drying and a little bit in the processing and the post exposure. But now we're down to that 30 minutes, right? So how long does it take to make a plate in fast? People want just a one-word answer. Let's say 30 minutes to 45, depending on variables. Way less than solvent. Let's look at the throughput of this too. So conventional workflow versus an XPS workflow, right? So the first thing plate making starts with is taking a plate out of storage. So we take that plate out of storage, we back expose the plate, we put that plate in a CDI and we image it. Now we got to go back to the exposure unit, right? That one unit, most people aren't going to have two. This would be a little bit more efficient if you had to, but no one does that I know of. You can then go to your fast plate processor. Now, with the XPS, you take the plate out of storage, but you don't go into the exposure unit. You go right to the imager. And remember, it's image and then it's exposed, and the main and back are done at the same time. So, there's different ways to add up numbers. I thought Rory had some good charts yesterday that said when you have an XPS, the exposure on an XPS is a little bit longer than the exposure in a bank light, right? But the total throughput time is less. As plates get faster, that gap is going to bridge. But almost any way you add up the workflow with an XPS, the total amount of time is less. And there's no real way to account for, let's call them bottlenecks or traffic jams. The workflow at the left is much more amenable to be caught up in bottlenecks or traffic jams than a linear workflow that you see on the right.
Yeah, and don't forget that with that conventional exposure at the back exposure, you have to count in time for warming up those bulbs before back exposure, which, if the unit's been sitting, during imaging, and you're starting the next plate, they might be cold. So then you have to take 3 minutes to warm the bulbs up. And that's a time waster.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Brad. Thanks for pointing that out. DuPont, of course, is environmental stewardship is a great priority of DuPont, right? And Thomas Dubar in our first session here was telling me about how it's one of the basic pillars. It's only second to hub labels after employee safety, right? So if you have a company that is committed to safety and sustainability, you have a good company to work for. And DuPont's not only considerate about their responsibility, but also about all their customers. So let's just look at some numbers here. Let's look at, first of all, anytime you suck up energy needlessly, you're adding to your carbon footprint. You're adding to climate change, right? And so let's take the first one here is non-renewable energy consumption. So the Cyrel Fast uses 30% of the energy that a solvent process would use. That's 63% less. We can play games with numbers here. So that's just so that you understand it. 37% of the energy, 63% less. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it's 47% less direct emissions of greenhouse gases, which is 53% less. So a much, much greener workflow. And to try to put this in real terms, in the last 5 years, Cyrel Fast processors have helped reduce CO2 emissions equivalent to 109 million fewer miles driven by passengers' vehicles, right? And this is some life cycle data that DuPont engineers and chemists gathered by probably talking to some of you out there and adding up these numbers. So let's end this with 2 case studies. So I think Julian owes me a dinner and a beer because I told him that everything except the case studies would be done by 3:11.
That is not right.
I think I said that. I'm pretty sure I said I will finish the talk with the exception of the case studies before 311. So I don't know, maybe this is recorded, maybe not. But I do think what's really valuable here, you know, everybody can talk about technology. Vendors, of course, have a vested interest in promoting technology, especially technology that we invent and create and market, right? And what's often absent from these is real world testimonials, so to speak. And to some degree, our let's say our partners, right, our customers don't have that great of an incentive to show what they're doing. So we especially appreciate companies like Hub Labels, who is happy to show people what they're doing to try to make the world a better place. So Jim and I spent some time at Hub this summer. If those of you who get Flexo magazine, great article on Hub Labels this month. But let me just give you a real high-end overview. What does Hub do? They do pressure sensitive. That's the everyday common Flexo label. But as we all know, everyone on this webinar knows that the quality requirements of pressure sensitive are way higher than ever before. They have kind of a niche market in linerless labels. There's just one application of meat packing. And unlike many Flexo printers, they also do direct mail. And a lot of us can kind of poo-poo direct mail and mail quality as junk mail and all that. But, you know, they're competing with offset. All this stuff today is printed with offset. So they need white highlights, right? They need to be able to fade to zero. They need all the things that we're talking about in terms of quality here. So what do they have here? This is their 4835 XPS plate exposure unit. So there we have, I was going to say Jason. I can't remember his name now, unfortunately for me. But we have Kirk, yeah, of course. So Kirk is putting his plate in the plate exposure. So he has just imaged that plate on his CDI. I'll show you that in a second. He just moved it over on the table to the 4835, and he pressed the exposure button, and now it's going to expose that plate. So now let's take a look at the entire unit. So you see there's the 4835. So Hub bought the latest of both of these units, and they have them connected together. And that's how you get the very best imaging with the very best throughput. So let's take a look at some of the things to do to set this up. So, you know, you should not have to redo your entire printing plant from scratch. You should not have to rebuild all your artwork. You should not have to request different files coming in different ways. You should be able to do everything in your artwork stage exactly the same, if not maybe slightly easier, until you get to this. And then we'll do a few tests to get you your curves and go from there. But the first test we'll do is a pixel boost step test. Then we'll do a print control wizard chart. Then we're going to do, at Hub, we did a curves press run. Those are P2P charts that Kim Madigan was talking about a second ago. And then there's our characterization run. So we do that to get our final profiles and our final, actually we get our curves out of that too. So we get another set of curves. So if you want to take a look at this, you can make a printing condition. And what's kind of cool is you make a printing condition called white bop, and it stores all of your screening information. It knows your dot set, your angle set, and your ruling. It also will tell you that the dot shape that the print control wizard found to be optimum. So in the case of Hub, they were a C19 at a 175. It even shows you your screen angles there. And your curve is set in your strategy. So it even has a curve to use there. So we can take a look at, the first thing I think I look at, and I know Jim's the same, and I've been with Ken Pavette, when print samples came in, the first thing we all look at is the fade to zero, right? Are you getting a nice clean fade to zero? So this was actually a 0.8% min dot, but because that's what the print control wizard told us to use, and Jim and I, you know, rechecked it with our eyes and agreed. But it looks, if you have this print sample in front of you, it looks like a beautiful fade to zero to your eye. It's just enough randomization so that your eye perceives it as a fade and not a hard line. let's take a look at some interesting things here. What they do is, this gets into the fact of not spending as much time with artwork. When you buy the Print Control Wizard, it comes with a post-strip dot cleanup. You can buy this separately as well, but it comes with the Print Control Wizard. So we told it to clean up any dot that's less than 19 pixels. So let me go and show you these files. I'm going to blow these up. Let's just take a look at the cyan. On the left is the file without any cleaning. If you don't have our highlight dot cleanup function, that's what you're getting today. Those of you who are dot geeks looking closely at this are going to see that today. But when on the right is the dot cleanup set to 19 pixels. So there's a 19 pixel dot. That's going to be in the file because that's what we set it to. Actually, the Print Control Wizard automatically sets it to that because it found that. And it cleans up anything that's less than 19. So you can see on the left that that dot that's less than 19, it's actually 6, is not in the file on the right, right? Now, how much junk do we have in that file? Well, look at all those little red arrows going in there. There can be a lot of junk in a file depending upon how much noise is in your image. But any image that's not at the resolution of your output device, which is 4000 dpi, which really means every image will have scum. Every image will have scum, right? And we can do a lot to clean that up. And cleaning up the scum here effectively translates into cleaner print. So when this job came back from came back from the press room, right? Jim and I and Charles Cole and the team who was down there working with Hub took that. The first thing I thought was I helped create this target here, and instead of making Flexo friendly images, we took images directly from the Idea Alliance website, right? So these are offset images. We just went on there, downloaded the file, plopped them in, right? So this looks like high-end offset. Well, how does Flexo, why doesn't Flexo look like high-end offset? Why does Flexo have that flat look? One of them is you have to fade to 0, even in images, not just in drop shadows, not just at the edge of vignettes. You've got to do it in images if you want to have that nice, sharp, clean look of high-end offset. And, here we're doing this remotely, of course. I wish I could share the print sample with you. I have it sitting on my desk right next to me right now. But it looks, I can't say any other word other than high-end offset. People have talked, one of the trouble images is like silverware, right? So this is a whole table setting you can buy from the Idea Alliance, and it'll never look right if you don't drop. But it's not just the speculars. This orange looks gorgeous. And if you look at the yellow, we're holding dots most of the places, but the magenta, you're missing about half your dots, and that hit and miss is what's giving you that detail, that kind of textured look on the surface of the orange, and it's outstanding. I've taken this and held it up because I do work for offset printers as well. So does Kim, by the way. She does Flexo and offset, you could hold this right next to an offset sample. It looks the same. So I consider Hub to be a very innovative company, and a company whose goal is to always stay a little bit ahead of the technology curve. And I think now with the new 4835 Crystal CDI and XPS plate exposure, we are making their existing fast processor better than it's ever been. And they're going to be able to use one plate material, EFX for everything. Now, I'm going to wind this up with a case study of Hammer Packaging in Rochester, New York. And they are really one of the most well-respected label printers in the United States. And they are a very benevolent firm. They've had ample chances to move their operations to other locations where you might get cheaper labor and more favorable tax incentives and stuff like that. But they are located in 2 large areas in Rochester, New York. So part of this is in the RIT industrial park. This facility here is part of the industrial park with a bunch of other high-tech businesses. And then part of it is in one of the Kodak facilities, which is now called the Rochester Technology Park. They do just about every kind of label printing you can even imagine. And these are just some of the examples of the label printing they want to do. And I didn't even show flexible packaging on here. So they do just about every kind: shrink sleeve, pressure sensitive, film labels, roll fed, in mold, anything you can imagine here. So here's Tim at Hammer Packaging making a plate. You can see this is the 4835 XPS. So they have kept, they had a crystal, I shouldn't say crystal, a spark. They had a 4835 spark in really good shape. All they did was upgraded the optics so that it could run Pixel Plus. They did that like a week before Jim and I showed up. And then they put in the XPS 4835. And that combination, I'm going to show you some of the quality that they're getting is pretty amazing. But any of us who have processed thermal plates in the past also have to say that you would not get the level of quality that I'm about to show you with the old fast processors. You really need the TD2000. You really need the latest technology. This was described yesterday, actually by Brad, showed you some of the reasons why you can image much smaller dots on this and hold them and not have them get pulled off the plate, wicked off the plate with this because of the more consistent adjustment. So what did Jim and I do when we got there? Well, we ran a Pixel Boost step test, pretty similar to what we had done at Hub. We ran some print control wizard charts, measured that out. You know, Hammer Packaging does a lot of expanded gamut. So they have our Equinox technology, and they are really good at that. They know how to do press runs. They've done more press characterizations than Jim or I have done. So, you know, they know how to do press characterizations. All they needed from us was set up the system, tell us the pixel boost, tell us the optimum crystal screen. We'll take it from there. So I'll show you some pictures of some of the work that they did. And, you know, we talk about surface patterns. So let's just talk a little bit about surface patterns. Then I'll talk about highlight dots. Surface patterns are really critical in film because if you have a non-porous, we're talking about fluid mechanics at the very beginning of this, right? And spilling milk on a glass table and things like that. Well, if you get a little bit slightly deeper into fluid mechanics, if you have a non-porous plate on a non-porous substrate, then the ink does not know where to go and it fights against each other. So on paper, there's not that great of a need for surface patterns. Corrugated is different. We're going to be talking about corrugated in 2 weeks, but we're going to be creating screens just for corrugated. That's the only case where I've really seen a desperate desire for surface patterns with paper. But Hammer, a lot of the stuff that they print is not paper, right? The whole shrink sleeve world and flexible packaging world is non-paper. So this is just a single shot. I have this little cheap microscope I got from Amazon.com for $25. At some point, I should get a better one. It's hard to line it up right, and it's hard to focus it without moving it. But you know, that's what you would see if you look through this with a 10 power glass. No editing in Photoshop, nothing fake there. Let's move this over to the type. And there's the type with the normal plate surface. You can see the ink fighting against itself on that film. And there's the type on the crystal surface, right? So there's surface patterns in there. Now, everything I'm showing you here exposed on a Spark 4835 CDI, I should say imaged on a Spark 4835 CDI, exposed on an XPS, all EFX plate material processed with a TD2000. Right? Let's take a look at these dots. Now, you know, those of you who are cynical would say, oh, you faked that out. Well, first of all, that's why I really wanted this to be in one screenshot. So I carefully set my microscope down right at that screen, and I fought to get my focus right. But it looks exactly like that under a microscope. In fact, Eileen Henry calls those scrambled egg dots. Eileen is one of the pre-press specialists at Hammer. So there's no fooling here. Like, you can't go in and fool somebody and make them think your technology is doing better. Like, all this stuff is right there for you to see. Use your own eyes, use your own common sense. They have a bunch of Mark Andy presses. Tim, their pressman's also named Tim, by the way, which makes it easier for me to remember their names. He is a joy to work with. You can tell also this is COVID-19 era, right? Because all of us, Tim in the plate room had his mask on, and Tim on the press had that. But Jim Schultz wanted to test some different sticky backs with some different analoxes, and Eileen and said, "Hey, that's okay," but she wanted to make sure it was okay with Tim, and Tim's like, "Hey, whatever you want to test." So they threw a few different rollers in there, and they threw different tapes in there, and they, you can see some differences with the different tapes. A little bit softer tapes can actually help to reduce press bounce if you have trouble with gear marking. That's a completely separate subject. We're not going to go there. But basically, let's take a look at some small highlight dots, right? This should look good to your eye. So this is a pre-control wizard chart. It has elements that are made for automatic measurement. But just to your eye, you should be able to look at those vignettes, and they should look good. And if you blow this up, this is a true screenshot of theirs. This is going all the way to 0, by the way. So this is like a gravure fade out highlight vignette. And Jim Schultz, did not want to go with the 0% highlight. The print control wizard recommended, I think, 0.9. And I think Jim Schultz said, "Hey, I know from a lot of experience we can go down to 0.8. So we went a little bit below what the print control wizard told us. And, getting curves and profiles, Hammer likes to get them all from one chart. So this is the IT87-5, which has the P2P, rows 4 and 5 of the P2P mixed in. So I don't know if they've gotten to that yet or not. I will talk to Pat Hunley or Eileen in the next couple of days. And but they know Hammer's profiled 1 million presses with 4-color and 7-color and all that. All they really need is a plate that can print a nice solid and a fade to 0. So that concludes our study of Hammer packaging. And, the future, as we see it, if we look what's going to happen over the next 10 years, I thought the insights from our panelists in the last session were right on. And I think all plate exposure will be LED at the end of 10 years, And, the message of this is it's ready in the label environment. We had some of the large trade shops. Next week, I'll be talking about SGS, how they've employed it at 2 facilities to do wide web film. Well, they have it for 80 inches, and they're going to talk about the uniformity they get over 80 inches. Now that technology is really fit for the label environment. I guess we'll end with this statement here. The world's in the midst of a lighting revolution. It's going to affect every aspect of lighting that any of us deal with. It's based on the light emitting diode, the LED. So be a part of this revolution, be a part of this LED lighting revolution, be a part of the sustainability evolution, and we can all help to make the world a better place. So with that, Julian, I think you owe me a beer and a dinner.
Thank you very much, Brad and Mark, and that was a fantastic presentation. You still have Corey named there, and I hope she's doing okay. Well, it's always a pleasure betting food and beer with you, Marcus. It saves me a lot of money. And,
I know, I always lose. When am I going to learn,
Yeah, but we went over time, but I think we have tons of questions, and I would like at least to have the opportunity to answer some of them, if you don't mind, if we can stay within the next 5 minutes at least.
But Julian, I thought somebody said yesterday they thought it went till 4 o'clock. Is that true? Was that true?
That was in your dream, probably. You always wanted to have more time for the presentation. Yeah.
Somebody said that yesterday.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and the first one is for Brad here. Brad, what is the total exposure time of EFX on the Crystal XPS unit?
Oh, geez. I don't know that exact timing. Actually, I think I got an email yesterday. Give me a couple minutes. I'll figure it out.
I actually have it. Julian, I have this one.
I have a sheet with all this on there.
The only reason I have it is that we did 45 XPS, which we did at Hammer, was 12 minutes. and which is less time on the 4835 XPS than the big one, right? Because the travel time is less of the head, right? And I think on the 67, it's about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like 13 or 14, so that sounds about right. It's around 15 minutes.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question also for you, Brad, is other than serial EFX, what other thermal plates does DuPont recommend for the label segment?
DFR is another good plate. And then for thermal, those are the two main ones, EFX and DFR, that I see being used for a label. And then DFM, if you need a really, really soft plate, if you have like uncoated paper being used on those labels, that softer durometer plate really helps conform to the uneven surface of uncoated paper. But EFX is a really just versatile plate that it can print on just about anything. It's a great plate and a good medium durometer.
So, Brad, is it true? I just want to make sure what I tell people is true. The world has always wanted to use less plates, right? Nobody wants to inventory 5 different plate materials, right? Is it true that the label printer of today, if they go with a CDI with a crystal XPS exposure and thermal processing, can probably use EFX for everything?
Oh yeah, because you can use it on water-based inks or UV-based inks. So and solvent if you're using that in narrow web, but I doubt it. But so it can print on all the ink types. It can do anything from film to papers to foils.
It's a shame Thomas is not with us, because I'd like to ask him. I think our friends at Hub and Hammer are going to switch everything to EFX now that we have all these pieces of the puzzle working together.
I mean, EFX is I think it's one of our best plates. It can, like you said, compete all day long with solvent plates and perform just as well, if not, better.
Right.
Excellent. So this is a question for you, Mark. What is the difference between the cells in a crystal screen and the cells in an HD Flexo screen?
Okay, so in a crystal screen, the cells go all the way to the edge of the dot. So let me, I think I can show this if I was really good at pulling up slides quickly. So in an HD Flexo screen, the cells are in the center of the dot. Then there's a protection ring or a fade parameter. So the cells never quite go to the edge. And when you have that protection ring, that mitigates much of the benefit of the cells, because you still have a suction effect. The reason, if you take a look at these dots with a solid dot, the reason you have a donut dot is there's some suction, there's some hydraulic vacuum that pulls ink out of the center of the dot. And if you have a plate that has a solid ring around the dot, it will still have that suction, right? Whereas with a crystal screen, the dots go all the way to the edge. And so you never have that hydraulic vacuum, and you always get a more uniform dot.
And also correct me if I'm wrong here, the crystal screens go further down the tonal range compared to the older HD screens with
they go all the way to the highlight. They go all the way to the highlight, in which case there's a few things you can do. And in next month's FTA webinar, I'll do that. Or maybe we could do another one where we just talk about screening, but they go all the way to the highlight. So somebody said the way we should describe protection rings is by saying protection rings suck. But our marketing organization said you can't say that in a Flexo magazine advertisement, right?
Yeah.
But it really is the hydraulic vacuum is what causes that.
And sometimes with the older screens too, comparing to the crystal, if you had like a longer gradient or vignette, you would see a little line where the microcell was fading out.
Yes.
And with the crystal, you don't see that. It is 100% smooth gradients.
Right. So there is a HD Flexo screen, right, and in the center, and that ring. Let me just go back and forth. This I just promise everybody, this is not trick photography. We never do that. It's an EXCO policy. Actually, it's in our compliance training. We can't do that. This MCWSI pattern with a protection ring, it's still the vacuum sucked out the ink from the center of the dot. Whereas the crystal screen, those little teeny pixels, as I tried to show earlier, they turn into big cells on the plate. And now you don't get a hydraulic vacuum because there's some place for that ink to go, right? All right.
Excellent. And just to confirm what you're just saying, anyone who wants.
I think we lost Julian.
Yeah, Julian. Every now and then, he's in Canada. He has internet issues. Every now and then. Hey,
that is okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, this I was kicked out. Probably it was you, Mark, who kicked me out from the. So no, what I was saying is that if anyone wants to see a sample of this, we can make a plate and you can run it in your conditions, and you will see exactly what Mark is showing in this slide. This happens every single time with crystal screens.
If you're printing on film.
On film,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So another question here, which is actually a very good question. Please feel free to answer, each of you. You show very small dots being held with LED exposure. Can you hold just a small dot with a backlight if you increase the exposure time?
That's a very insightful question. You can hold any size dot on any exposure unit if you give it enough time, right? Do you agree, Julian?
I would disagree.
Yeah.
That's part one. That's part one of my statement. Right?
Okay, you could do it, but then you would have cons to deal with.
Right. Okay, that's right. So if you do it, if you do it, you're ruining the other part of the plate, right? Your reverses will fill in. Sometimes your fine lines develop these big shoulders on them and things like that, right? So there is a lot to making a really, really good photopolymer plate. So XPS, you could almost say every plate ever made is a compromise between holding super fine isolated elements and holding larger elements. XPS does it better than any system I've ever seen. But here's the other thing. If you take this is a 19 pixel dot, what you see there in this diagram. If you, somebody's breathing a little bit heavy, careful with your breathing there. So if you take a 19 pixel dot and you image it on a, let's say a bank light, right? With some flat plate technology, nitrogen, in the plate or whatever you want to call it. And you take the same screen and you image it on an LED, and then you measure the actual size of the dot on the plate. It will be smaller on the XPS, on the LED unit. The dot size you actually get on the plate will be smaller. Because we have a couple customers that we're starting up right now that are using Crystal C22, larger. And they told me and said, hey, Mark, we tried C22 with backlight and it was too grainy. Now we're using C22 on LED and it looks great. What's the difference? And the difference is the C22 on a backlight, it's a larger dot than on the plate, physically larger. You can measure with a Betaflex unit than the C22 exposed on an XPS LED unit.
Yeah, no, I would like to add to that too, Mark. So two things. I think with the backlight exposure, you could hold, the 19 pixel no problem. Going below that, backlight is going to be very difficult. But I've seen the LED, the XPS, hold that 12 and 16 pixel dot. And another thing is that I think comparing, the 19 pixel on the LED and the bank, they might both hold it, but the LED is going to hold it much more consistently. Whereas with the 19 pixel, if you go to an area in your backlight exposure that might have lower UV output, then those dots might be smaller or filling. Yeah. Where the LED is going to be consistent across the whole sheet of the plate.
That's well stated.
I agree with that. Yeah.
What's interesting, at Hammer, the print control wizard said we could use the C12. But we looked at it with the different people there, Pat Hundley and Eileen Henry and Jim and I, and we showed it to some other people there, and we asked which one. And Pat Hundley kind of turned around and said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to use the largest one that doesn't look grainy to the eye. And so we were looking at it with the eye, and everybody thought, okay, from 9 to 19 looks the same to the eye. 19 is not more grainier than 9. So at 22, you can see a little bit of a grain. At 25, 30, and 36, obviously a lot more grain. And Paul Rainfield, the pre-press manager at Hammer, he also concurred with that logic. So we all kind of agreed to let's use the largest dot that doesn't look grainy. And all of them are smaller than the bank. If you did the exact same thing on a bank light, your grain would start happening at around 16 to 19.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the last question, not because we don't have any more, but we have too many. This is coming from Ron, and he wants to know if Print Control Wizard also gives you the optimum pixel boost setting. I think that's a short answer.
Julian, nothing with me is a short answer. But what I want to do is, if I can, I'm trying to get to the pixel boost curve test, right? To talk about this. Can I? How long will it take me to find that slide? Yeah. Okay. So the pixel boost step test is a critical step test of this. The Print Control Wizard generates the Print Control Wizard, the pixel boost step test chart. But this is really, right now, this is all manual measurement. So a human being is going to go through the pixel boost step test. You can use density to see where your density is optimized. But we also encourage you now to use a glass, look at your type quality, and look at your reverses and your fine type and your dot quality. So is that short answer, Julian?
Yeah, it's short enough, and it was clear. Thank you so much.
And I would add just a little bit to that too, that if you're already using Pixel Plus in your workflow, with the plate, and then you're going to add Print Control Wizard crystal screens, what I've found with many customers doing that is that you can use the same pixel boost settings. As long as you're using the same inks, substrates, analogs, plate type. The pixel boost has been the same, just going from regular, HD screens with Pixel Plus to the PCW screens. If you're changing the exposure unit, that's going to change it though.
Yeah, I think you're right. Julian, you want to comment
Excellent.
on that?
No, I agree with you guys. Perfect. And thank you very much, both of you, for this excellent presentation. A lot of information, very useful. I appreciate everyone who hold with us till the end. And I also would like to invite you to register for next week. Next week, we are on Tuesday and Wednesday. We are going to have another 2 half-a-day sessions. And if you have any questions, you can email us at info.usa@esco.com, or you can email Mark, Brad, or myself. All right. Thank you very much.
Hey, Julian, let me ask one last request. So next week, I'm going to be doing a similar talk. It's going to be on the same technologies, right? XPS plate exposure for wide web. And if any of you want me to share information from you, if you do wide web printing, I know this is a narrow web seminar, I'd be happy to share it. Right now, I'm planning on sharing information from SGS. Everybody knows SGS, one of the biggest pre-media companies in the United States. But if you want me to, if you have an XPS plate exposure and have information on wide web film, I'd be happy to share information from your company as well. And I would just like to thank Hub and Hammer for being open enough to allow me to share their information with you on this webinar.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much, and hope to see you next week. Thanks.